They say some parts of the countryside have stories that don't get passed down, places that remember things too old to speak, things older than God, even. I never believed in that sort of talk, not until the autumn I spent in Grange Fen, a hamlet so far out, it might as well be on the edge of the map. My name's Thomas Ellery, and this is the only time I'll tell this story, because once it starts, something always listens. The inheritance I inherited the cottage from an uncle I'd never met, Calvin Ellery, my father's estranged brother. It came in a lawyer's envelope with a brass key and a single note in cursive that read, "Do not touch the orchard." I thought it was a joke. The property was near a place called Grange Fen in Northumberland. No cell signal, no neighbors in sight, just rolling fields and wild hedges. The cottage itself was a quaint thing, ivy-choked, 2 floors, and full of the kind of silence that feels deliberate. And behind it, down a small slope beyond an overgrown stone wall, was the orchard. It stretched far wider than I expected, gnarled trees packed together like ribs in a chest. I counted 11 trunks in total, all twisted, all bare, all dead, or so I thought. The first night was uneventful, if a little unsettling. The cottage creaked too often, and the wind rattled the old iron chimney like someone trying to speak through it. I lit the fireplace, drank, wrote in my journal. I woke around 2:30 a.m. to the sound of apples hitting the roof, heavy thuds, not random, one after another, like someone throwing them from the orchard. When I stepped outside, the orchard was dark, but I swear, the third tree on the left had changed shape. It looked like someone was standing beneath it. Local knowledge: the village store was 7 miles off, a crooked little shop run by an elderly couple, the Marsdens. Mrs. Marsden asked why I was up in Grange Fen. When I said, "Uncle Calvin's place," her expression changed completely. She looked at her husband, then at me. "Best you stay out of the trees, Mr. Ellery," she said. "Your uncle did." I asked what she meant. Mr. Marsden looked up from his newspaper and said, "You'll hear things past midnight. Ignore them." Then he added, without looking at me, "And whatever you do, don't answer." The apple. On the 4th day, I found an apple on the kitchen table, smooth, red, unblemished. I hadn't picked it. I hadn't even entered the orchard. I picked it up. It was warm. That night, I locked every door and window. I even pushed furniture against the front door. I watched from the upstairs window. At 1:41 a.m., the third tree shifted again. I don't mean the branches swayed. I mean it moved. It leaned toward the house, just slightly, and held its shape. And under it stood a tall figure in black, with a head too small and legs too long. When I blinked, it was gone. But the next morning, I found another apple, this time on my pillow. The journal. I found my uncle's journal in the attic. It was hidden inside a chest, beneath dozens of dried apple cores wrapped in muslin. The entries were scattered, obsessive, like someone trying to hold on to their sanity. One stood out. "The orchard hears everything. The trees eat the voices. That's how it grows. That's why it wants us to talk. Once you speak in the orchard, it learns your name. It puts you in the bark." Another entry. 3 people vanished in 1968. No screams, just silence, just apples. "You'll find the face in the third tree if you look too long." The whispering. That night, I made a mistake. I walked into the orchard, just a few feet, just enough to stand beneath the third tree. It was colder here. No bird song, no bugs, just breathless air. I turned back, satisfied I hadn't given in. That's when I heard it. "Thomas." It came from behind me, quiet, but familiar. I turned, nothing. Then again, closer. "Thomas, come deeper." The voice was my father's, but Dad had been dead 6 years. I ran, back in the house. I locked myself in the bathroom. I didn't sleep, and in the morning, there were 5 apples on the kitchen table, each with a bite taken out of it. Each bite was mine. The hollowing, it escalated after that. The walls of the house began to sweat sap. The chimney oozed with rot. My reflection started to lag in the mirror, moving after I did. The orchard was greener than it had been before, the trees fuller, and every morning, more apples, always warm, always too perfect. And in the bark of the third tree, I finally saw it, a face, my uncle's, mouth open in a silent scream, eyes wide, teeth carved into the grain, like worms writhing. I smashed the apple I'd found that morning against the wall. It bled. The orchard keeper. I don't remember the eighth night clearly, only flashes, the door opening on its own, a figure in the hallway, made of branches and ash, its face a hollow apple, pulsing with rot. It didn't speak, it didn't move, but in my head, I heard the sound of roots growing through bone. When I woke up, I was in the orchard, standing beneath the third tree. My hands were sticky with sap, and there was a new apple on the ground, shaped exactly like a human heart. I left the next morning, drove until I reached the sea. I tried to throw the journal into the ocean, but it floated. I buried it instead, along with the last apple, which had followed me somehow, inside my coat pocket, even though I'd burned it the night before. Sometimes, I dream of trees now, rows of them, stretching forever, and I can hear the voice of my father, still saying my name. I think the orchard marked me. I think I left, but something stayed behind. Or worse, something came with me. It's been 6 months. I haven't gone back to Grange Fen, but last week, I found an apple on my doorstep, red, perfect, warm, and when I picked it up, I heard a knock at the door, 3 knocks, slow, deliberate. There was no one there, only the distant sound of leaves rustling, though there was no wind. I threw the apple in the fire. It screamed, "Do not go to Grange Fen, do not speak in the orchard, and if you find an apple that feels too warm, don't eat it, don't even touch it, because once the orchard learns your name, you'll be its harvest." The envelope came without a return address. Inside was a USB drive. No letter, no note, just a file titled, "The Orchard. Do not listen alone." I'm not easily rattled. I've investigated over 24 known haunts in rural Europe. Whitchurch Crypt, the Bleeding Lane in Leeds, and the Mirror Pond in Surrey. But the voice on the recording, that wasn't a man telling a story, that was a man unraveling. The recording, his voice, Ellery's, was hoarse, trembling. Half the time, he stopped mid-sentence like something was listening. The audio degraded with every minute. Toward the end, there were other voices layered beneath his, a whispering choir, chanting, backwards. I looped one part 10 times before I realized what they were saying. The third tree is open again. Arrival in Grange Fen. I arrived just before dusk. Same coordinates Ellery had mentioned in the file. The cottage stood exactly as he described. Lonely, moss-covered, and too still. Windows dark, mail rotting in the slot, and the orchard behind it. It was alive. The trees were in full bloom. Impossibly so. The others around the countryside were bare, but these trees were hungry, their trunks twisted toward the house like they'd grown for it, like they'd been reaching. First night, he spoke again. I stayed in the cottage, brought a full recording setup, motion detectors, EMF meters, 2 static cams, a shotgun mic. Midnight passed uneventfully, but at 1:19 a.m., my handheld recorder clicked on by itself. I hadn't touched it. A voice played through the speaker. It was Thomas Ellery, only it was something else using his voice, speaking through him. "You've entered the grove. You've looked at the bark. Now the bark will look at you." I played it back 3 times. Due by the third, the voice answered my questions before I asked them. Into the grove. At dawn, I stepped into the orchard. I kept the third tree in my peripheral vision, never directly looking at it. Still, the trees leaned slightly inward as I walked. Branches hung lower. The light dimmed unnaturally. When I stood near the third trunk, the EMF reader maxed out. Then my recorder whispered, "What did your mother call you before she died?" "Marshall." I never told anyone that name, not even my partner, but the trees knew. The hollow tree, The third tree had a split down the center, like a wound. I stepped closer, holding out a mirror. Reflections are safer, I learned that years ago. Inside the split, I saw shapes, faces, dozens of them, eyes closed, mouths open. One face had my cheekbones, another had my father's nose. They weren't carved, they were growing. The face that spoke, the mirror cracked in my hand. Blood dropped onto the roots, and one of the faces, an old man's, opened its eyes. It whispered, "We are what you forget, and when you remember, we wear you." I turned and ran, but as I reached the edge of the orchard, the trees swayed as one, and the sky went silent. No wind, no birds, no breath. "You behind me," I heard my mother's voice. "Marshall, it's cold in there, don't leave me in the bark." Day 2, the house changes back in the cottage. Everything was different. The wallpaper peeled itself back in long strips, revealing names etched into the wall beneath. Each name was followed by a date and a word. Mine read, Marshall Clemens, November 3rd. Route I tried to pack, to leave, but the front door now opened into more orchard, trees stretching where the gravel road should be, and every apple on the ground bore my reflection, blinking. To sound that follows, I set up my remaining equipment in the attic. Something had torn the journal pages from Ellery's notebook and tacked them to the walls. New entries had appeared, written in sap. One read, "The orchard keeper comes at the 4th knock." So I waited. At 3:33 a.m., the knocking began. 4 slow knocks. The attic door creaked open by itself, and I saw him, the orchard keeper, a tall man of bark and human skin. His head split in two, half fruit, half bone. He had eyes carved into his chest, blinking like mouths, and when he stepped forward, the trees groaned in unison. He spoke through me. I don't remember what happened next, only that when I woke up, I was in the orchard again, naked, covered in bark fragments, and my own voice, distorted, was playing from my recorder. We all speak for it now. To grow its story, each retelling feeds it. You'll tell someone, won't you, Marshall? And now you've read it. If this account reaches anyone, listen closely. Grange Fen isn't a place, it's a wound. The orchard grows from something buried too deep for God to see. Something that mimics love, memory, grief. It lures with the voices of the dead. It carves the willing into bark, and the curious into fruit. If you read this, it's already watching you. You'll start to dream of trees. You'll start hearing your name in the rustling. And when the 3rd knock comes, don't answer the 4th. Inheritance isn't always a gift. I wasn't looking to move. I had a job in the city, a girlfriend I could have proposed to, a flat above a cafe, where the baristas remembered my name and order, but the letter changed everything. It came on thick, yellowing parchment, real wax seal, like something out of Victorian drama. It said, my great-aunt, Margaret Rowley, had died and left me her estate. The house was called Greymire Hollow, out in the South Shropshire Hills, near a village too small to have a petrol station. I'd never heard of the place, nor had I ever met Aunt Margaret, but the deed was real, the lawyer was real, and curiosity has always been my worst habit. So, I went. The house, beneath the hill Greymire Hollow, was nestled at the foot of a misty slope. Stone walls, black slate roof, crooked chimneys, like elbows sticking out of the earth. Ivy clung to everything. The air smelled like moss and wet wood. It was quiet, too quiet. Inside, the house hadn't been touched in decades. Dust layered every surface. The air felt thick, as if holding its breath. In the lounge, a fireplace sat cold beneath a painting of a bell tower I didn't recognize. A single cracked bell hung from its frame. No rope, no stairs, just the bell, suspended in air. Strange thing was, the tower didn't appear anywhere on the maps, but I'd soon come to know it well. They don't talk about the tower. The locals were pleasant enough, when they weren't avoiding eye contact. I stopped at a roadside pub, the Thistle and Yew, and asked the barkeep if he knew anything about the old tower on the hill. The entire place went silent. One man, older than the beams above him, finally spoke. "There's no tower in Greymire." I insisted I'd seen it in the painting. He looked me dead in the eye. "That bell hasn't rung since 1926, and if you value your breath, lad, you'll keep it that way." No one spoke to me after that. Bells in the mist. The first night was uneventful, save for the dreams. I stood in a field, grass tall as my waist, mist curling like fingers around my knees. Ahead of me, the bell tower from the painting, only it wasn't still. It swayed, just slightly, like a tree in windless air. Then the bell rang, a deep, metallic sound, too slow to be churchly, more like a warning or a calling. I woke in a sweat, convinced someone had rung it outside, but there was only mist beyond the window, and at the base of the bed were 3 long feathers, damp with dew. The locked room. There was one room in the house that wouldn't open. Iron latch, no key. On the 3rd night, I heard movement from inside, scratching, like claws on stone. Then a whisper, my name, Ian. I put my ear to the door, and heard the unmistakable sound of a bell. Not loud, just once, but when I blinked, I was on the floor. 2 hours had passed, and a faint ring of soot had formed around the locked door. The walk to the tower. By the 5th day, I had to see it for myself. The tower. I followed the hill path into the mist, not thinking clearly, as if pulled. After 10 minutes, the land changed. The trees were bent backward, as if recoiling. No birds, no wind. Then I saw it. The bell tower, partially sunk into the hill, grey stone covered in lichen. No windows, just one tall arch, where the bell swayed gently, without wind. There were symbols etched around the base, circles within circles, and dozens of bird feathers, rotting in heaps. One single line was carved below them. The bell keeps them beneath. The ringing that night. The bell rang again, louder. This time, it shook the windows of Greymire Hollow. The ground trembled, and beneath the house, I swear I heard something answering. A sound like wings brushing against wood, something shifting in a space too tight. In the mirror, across the room, I wasn't alone. Something stood behind me, tall, thin, with a head like a raven's skull. I turned. Nothing, but the floorboards where it stood were blackened. The journal. I broke into the locked room. The next morning, inside was a study, untouched, bookshelves with old occult tomes, a fireplace, and a desk covered in feathers. A journal lay open, Margaret's handwriting. They are beneath, waiting. The bell seals them in. Every 7 nights it must ring. If it doesn't, they remember the sky. Another entry. One escaped in 1926. That's why we don't talk about it. And then, I've grown old. I can't climb anymore. If I miss the ring, may the next Rolly remember his name before they take it from him. The 7th night, I tried to stay awake, tried to ignore the dreams of feathers and hollow eyes. But the bell, it didn't ring. I woke at 3:11 a.m. The air was wrong, sour, like decay and rust. Then I heard the creaking, not outside, beneath the floorboards. From the basement, I opened the door, light flickering, and stared down into darkness. The steps were wet. At the bottom, a faint light glowed, and shadows with wings moved just beyond its reach. The thing beneath. I descended. The air grew colder, the silence thicker. Then I saw it, a pit in the center of the cellar, ringed with rusted chains and small bones. At its edge was a feathered mass, pulsating like a cocoon. It cracked as I approached. Inside was a face, mine. It smiled with too many teeth, and whispered, "You forgot the bell, Ian." And the thing crawled out. I rang the bell. I ran, climbed the hill, barefoot, bleeding, half screaming, at a sky that watched. The bell tower was already vibrating. I gripped the rusted rope, suddenly real, and pulled. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, something inside me tore. I saw feathers burst from my skin. I heard my mother's voice calling my name, though she'd been dead 8 years. But I rang it a 5th time, and the wind screamed back. What I brought back. I'm not in the house anymore. I left that same night, walking barefoot, until I found the road. But I didn't come back alone. Wherever I go now, Birds drop dead from the sky, mirrors warp when I pass, and in dreams, I still ring that bell, because if I stop, they'll rise again, and next time, they won't stop with me. If you ever hear a bell in the countryside, deep in the night, do not follow the sound, do not go up the hill, because it doesn't just keep them in, it keeps you out, and the next time it doesn't ring, they'll remember your name, too. Police report, March 14th, 2025, filed by Constable Andrew Vell, Shropshire Constabulary. Subject, missing persons. Ian Rowley. Subject, was last seen in Clun Valley, heading north on foot, left vehicle behind at Greymire Hollow Estate, house in disrepair, evidence of forced entry to sealed room, basement door ajar, old pit discovered, uncovered, foul smell, numerous animal bones, strange iron bell found in pit, still warm, no sign of Ian Rowley, air inside home affected officers, 2 reported headaches, 1 reported auditory hallucinations, feathers brushing wood, case open, suspicion of mental distress or delusion, officer note, unnatural silence at the property, birds do not approach, excerpt from local folklore archive, recovered journal, author unknown date, September 1927, filed under Greymire incident. The priest said the bell was an anchor, said it held back the winged shadows that came from the chalk mouths under the hill. The night it failed to ring, they returned. 3 children vanished, 1 reappeared at dawn, no eyes, feathers sewn into their mouth, still breathing. The tower was sealed, buried in fog. The villagers agreed, never again. The bell is not holy, but it is necessary. The Ghostline podcast, episode pulled before release. Host, Marianne Calloway. Subject, The Bells of Greymire Hollow. Interview with Judith Marsh, age 94. Marianne, you said you remember the last time it rang. Judith, course I do. You never forget it. The sound makes your skin pull back, makes your tongue want to crawl out. Marianne, why does the village pretend it doesn't exist? Judith, because naming it feeds it. Every mention grows its wings. That bell don't keep them in, it draws them close to where they once were. Each ring a dinner bell. Marianne, then why ring it? Judith whispers, because worse comes if it stays silent. Audio glitch. Low frequency hum begins around 12:14. Unidentified voice beneath Judith's final sentence. Marianne, we see you now. Incident report, April 1st, 2025. Property maintenance crew assigned to Greymire Hollow fails to return. Drone sent. 1 drone captured last image. The bell tower, previously unmarked, fully exposed. Bell hanging in midair, swinging without wind. Nearby tree canopies appear disturbed, like flight paths. Audio captured before drone loss. Low hum of fluttering sounds. Human laughter. Distorted case status. Suspended due to weather anomalies. Survivor account, posted anonymously to a cult forum. The Watcher's Grove. Username Withered Wing 9. Date, April 9th, 2025. I knew Ian, not well, but enough. I found his voice in my dream, inside a bell, echoing. He said, they wear what you forget. They breathe where the wind used to live. I was pulled there, walked the path to the tower, didn't mean to. Inside me, something knew the steps. The bell wasn't ringing, something else was. Flesh hanging from clappers, bones stuck in the seams, feathers forming glyphs. I don't think it keeps them down anymore. I think the tower's hungry now. And Ian's voice said one last thing, when it rings again, don't cover your ears. They've moved beyond the bell now. They've learned how to echo inside people. News clipping, Shropshire Gazette, April 18th, 2025. Bell sounds unexplained. Author Lucy Drew's residents across South Shropshire reported hearing low bell tones at 3:33 a.m. on Wednesday. No visible source located. Several callers complained of nightmares, bird deaths, and a strange metallic taste in the air. One witness claimed to see a tall feathered thing standing near the woods. Police have no official comment. Psychological explanation suspected. Final entry, written in a wall cavity at Greymire Hollow. Discovered May 2025. Initials, Iron Rowley. You can't kill the bell. It grows inward. It eats the name of the person who rings it. I don't know who I was anymore. They live in the sound now. The wind is their wing beat. The dream is their nest. I ring it every night in my head so you won't have to. But if I ever stop dreaming, if the bell falls silent, run. The bell never meant to warn. No one rings the bell now. The tower still sways in fog that doesn't rise or fall. The animals in the area have all gone. Farmers say the birds come back, but they don't blink anymore. Don't perch, don't sing. The villagers still don't talk about it, but they listen to the ringing that isn't there. And some say it's not a tower at all anymore. It's a mouth, open, waiting for your voice. You can't escape the past just by moving away from it. That's what I told myself the night I arrived at the old Bywater farmhouse, a crooked building hidden in the hills of Devon. It was late October, the sky thick with low clouds. Rain fell in needles. The house belonged to my cousin's family, abandoned after some family tragedy no one liked to talk about. My cousin Ellis had offered it to me for a few months to clear my head after my divorce, but the real reason I came was because of a letter I received. No return address, just a typewritten note. Don't sleep in the room with the eastern window. It remembers too much. I laughed at the time. I shouldn't have. The house groaned as I stepped in, like it hadn't been touched in years. It smelled of dried herbs, dust, and something faintly metallic. A low hum buzzed through the walls, like static under the skin. There were 4 bedrooms upstairs. Only one faced east. It was the only one not locked. A simple bed, thin mattress, a mirror bolted to the wall, and that window, large, paned and stained slightly red in the corners, as if blood had dried between the glass. The rest of the house was cold, but that room was warmer, too warm, like something had been waiting in it. First night I lay down around midnight. I left the door cracked open, just in case. You do strange things when you're alone. For the first time in years, somewhere around 2 a.m., I woke. The air was thick, still, and something wasn't right with the window. The curtains were open. I was sure I'd drawn them. Outside, in the field, something moved, slowly, deliberately. A person. No, too tall, too smooth. It walked like it was remembering how. Then it stopped, looked up. I swear it saw me through the glass, and then it smiled. No face, no mouth, just a crease in the air like a grin, made of shadow. I slammed the curtain shut. I didn't sleep again. Morning discoveries. The next day, I walked the field. No footprints, but I found something worse. A ring of stones directly below the eastern window. 12 of them, smooth, blackened, set in perfect symmetry. I didn't touch them, but in the center was a single wet handprint, human, child-sized, still fresh. It hadn't rained that morning. Journal in the attic on the 3rd day. I found a journal hidden behind a loose board in the attic. It belonged to Clara Bywater, Ellis's grandmother. The entries were erratic. Most were prayers, please, some written over and over again. Turn its face west, and it will forget. Do not let the sun touch the east glass. It wants names, not yours, old ones. The last page was torn, except for one phrase scrawled in the margins. It came back through the pain. We didn't break it fast enough. The scratch. The night after I read the journal, the scratching began, not at the walls, not at the door, inside the mirror. A slow, deliberate scrape, like fingernails across wet glass. When I looked, there was a shape behind me in the reflection, too thin, too still. I turned, nothing, but in the mirror, I saw it walk to the window, draw the curtain aside. Outside, the field was full of standing figures, motionless, facing east. The name game. I called Ellis the next morning. I told him about the journal, The mirror, the field. He went silent for a long time. Then he asked me, "Did you tell it your name?" I paused. I had on the first night, muttered it to myself while unpacking. He swore, "Don't speak inside the east room. Don't say names. It learns. That's how it spreads." He hung up before I could ask anything else. I packed that night, but when I opened the front door, it was the eastern window. Impossible, but there it was, framed in brick and ivy, glass glowing faintly red. The shift, every room I entered led back to the east room. The window followed me. Walls bent, corridors looped. I even broke a window in the kitchen to escape. Behind the broken glass, the eastern field, always the eastern field, and in it, the stone circle had grown, now 24 stones, and the handprint in the center had doubled, now 2 hands, one larger. The whisperers, they started whispering on the 5th night, in the walls, beneath the floorboards, sometimes through the mattress. Voices like broken clocks. "You left her. She called your name in the dark. You turned your back." They weren't talking about my ex-wife. These voices were older. They belonged to the house. I tried burning sage. I tried holy water. The window turned black for 1 hour. Then it breathed. The old story. I left a voice note on my phone, desperate to document what was happening. When I played it back, someone had edited it. There was a new voice, calm, measured, familiar. They trapped it in the glass long ago, a mourning spirit. But grief turns cruel. It learned to feed through eyes. Now it waits in pains. Mirrors, anything reflective. Once you see it, and say your name, it knows the shape of you. Then silence. Then you already gave it what it needs. The mirror cracks. That night, I smashed the mirror. It bled. Thick, black sap poured from the frame, hissing against the wood floor. Behind the broken shards was a second room, perfect and untouched, mirroring the east room. In it stood a crib. Inside the crib, a thing with my face, sleeping, smiling. I tried to burn the house. I lit every curtain, every room, gasoline from the shed. I watched the flames rise, but as the fire grew, the house bent backward, and the eastern window, it never cracked, not even smoke touched it. The fire stopped at its frame, like a dog afraid to bite. Then the whispers came back, louder, layered. One must stay in the east. One must always look. One must always feed. I blacked out. You'll find this note. I'm not writing this to be saved. I'm writing this so you don't come looking. If you find the Bywater place, it'll seem quiet, empty, but the eastern window will be intact. Don't enter, don't even look, because if you do, it will know your shape. And if you speak your name, you'll see yourself standing in the field, one of the still ones, one of the mourners. Ending that isn't. I still see it sometimes, in reflections that last too long, in windows that show fields when they shouldn't. I see the field growing. I hear new names whispered. It's learning faster now. It's remembering what it was before it wept. And if you're reading this, don't say your name aloud. Not here, not now, because the window faces east, and it's looking back. It came in a skip. Well, technically, it was part of a bulk lot, salvaged from a fire-damaged farmhouse in Devon. The estate was clearing out the remains. Brittle porcelain dolls, soot-stained bed frames, clawfoot tubs rusted straight through. Most of it went straight to auction or landfill, but I paid special attention to the glasswork. One piece stood out, a tall pane of stained glass, arched, with faint red coloring along the edges. No pattern, no imagery, just foggy distortion, and a feeling like something had been scraped off it. I didn't know what I was looking at. Not yet. Provenance. The invoice listed it as 1x decorative window, origin unknown, east-facing room, Bywater Farm, Devon. The moment I read Bywater, something prickled behind my eyes. I've been in this business 20 years. Provenance matters, and I remember old local stories, especially the ones whispered across bar tables at closing time. A fire, a missing man, a house that wouldn't stay burned. Still, I brought it back to my shop. I set it up in the back room. I turned to lock the front door, and I swear to God, the air temperature dropped behind me. First reflection, I caught the first oddity on day 2. I was closing shop, light outside dimming, and glanced into the glass. As I passed, I didn't see myself, not properly anyway. My reflection was facing away, back turned, still, breathing though. When I stopped and looked full on, it corrected itself. My reflection mirrored me again, but that moment lingered like a bruise on my thoughts. And that night, I dreamed of walking backward across a field, arms open wide to an empty sky. Customer feedback. 3 days later, a young couple visited. They never made it past the back room. The moment the woman saw the window, she went stiff, eyes wide, silent. Then she whispered, "Why does it have his face?" The man tried to pull her away, but she screamed, just once, short and jagged, the kind of scream that tears something in your throat. They left, never came back. I reviewed the shop's CCTV. Later that night, she hadn't been looking at the glass. She'd been staring at a spot just in front of it. Strange correspondence. An envelope came through the letterbox the next morning. No return address. Inside was a photograph. Old, grainy, black and white. A group of children standing in front of a farmhouse. Half their faces blurred. Above them, faint in the top window, a figure of light. The photo was labeled, Bywater East Room, 1912, scrawled on the back. The window was never made. It remembered itself into the wood. Don't let it face the dawn. The first birds began dying on the roof. 1 on Monday, 3 on Wednesday. By Friday, I counted 14. No wounds, just dead. Necks tilted, as if listening to something in the floor. I tried boarding the window up in the back room, covered it in thick canvas. Didn't help. The glass glowed through the cloth, a pulsing red light, like the color of blood, behind an eyelid. And behind it, I saw shapes moving. The audio tape. I received a parcel by courier. No name. Inside a small tape recorder, already playing, a man's voice. Calm, tired, on the verge of breaking. If you found the glass, it's too late to forget. It's not a window anymore. It's a mouth, a memory made visible. It feeds on attention, on recognition. Turn it west, always west. Let it face what it fears, what it forgot. A pause, then it remembers my name now. It's learning yours. I erased the tape, burned the tape, but I can still hear the voice. The new pain. On the 8th night, I woke at 3:33 a.m. to glass creaking, not breaking, stretching. I crept into the shop. The canvas had come loose. The window had grown. 2 new panes, added to either side, warped, like stained glass wings. My workshop was freezing, the air heavy, with the scent of rust and wet feathers. Then I heard the bell, once, distant, followed by my own voice, whispered from behind the glass. "Martin, come see, the dreaming man. I don't sleep anymore, because when I do, I dream of a man in the field, walking toward me backward, his head tilted, his arms broken at the elbows, and bent the wrong way. He smiles, then I wake, to find his footprint, wet and black, on my shop floor. Final entry. I've sealed the window in the cellar. It screams at night, not with sound, but with pressure. My ears ring, my teeth ache. I feel it chewing on memories I didn't mean to give it. It's not done growing. Sometimes I see people staring at the shop from across the street. They don't move, they don't blink. I've begun calling them the lookers, because they're not watching me, they're watching the window. And last night, one of them had my face. Addendum. Classified police memo, May 2025. Martin Ellaway, 47, antique dealer, reported missing. Final note, in ledger reads, do not face east. Basement door, found fused shut. Found inside, 1 pane of stained glass, glowing faintly. Reflection in glass does not match camera or observer. Audio present in otherwise silent footage. translates as the mouth remembers, and now it sings.